broadcast button? You mean okay. I am Christopher Herring. I'm the Executive Director of Global Chamber San Antonio, and I'd like to thank you to a webinar where we're exploring the continent of Africa. And today I have with me my Deputy Director, Joel Inglu. Joel is from the Congo, and he lives in San Antonio, Texas as a graduate student. And I'm so glad that he's able to serve in the Global Chamber, as well as to help me today with facilitating some information in them, which I believe that you should know more about the continent of Africa. We are also anticipating John Patrick from Côte d'Ivoire Coast of Africa to join us. And we also may have the president of the Texas Association of African American Chambers, Charles O'Neill, who also serves as the chairman of the board for the United States Black Chambers Incorporated. And I want to, before we get started, just give you a little bit of an overview of who we are as Global Chamber San Antonio. We have a basic principle of being global and unstoppable. In our Chamber of Commerce, you will find that we have 525 metropolitan markets in which we serve. And those are the largest metros across the world, where we believe that we can have a chamber that has businesses that are able to talk to each other across borders without having a lot of the bureaucracy that may come about in many of what we would call international business. And so I'm very proud to represent our chamber. Likewise, we believe that the Global Chamber provides reach, contacts, access, exposure, lots of information and visibility about this thing called the Global Tribe. And we want you to be a part of our Global Tribe. Our website is globalchamber.org. And again, when we talk about the vision for 2025, our founder, Doug Brunke, has enabled us to have contacts not only in the 525 metros, but look at the 100,000 organizations that we're able to touch that have so many great people to meet. When you join Global Chamber, you'll receive these member benefits, and we love the fact that we have strategic connections that will grow your business. And again, you can find out more at globalchamber.org. I think that you'll be glad that you did. And our chamber calendar of events is pretty exceptional. You'll find that there's something going on every single day, for the most part, for the exception of Sunday, where you'll find where you can actually tap into our events. And so our chair-elect is Jorge Canavati, and then the current chairwoman is Dr. Crystal Nedio, who will relinquish it at the end of the year. We just had a very good, outstanding event with our mayor of San Antonio, Ron Nirenberg, with the International State of the Metro. And we presented awards, and that was a great event. Last week, I believe it was, we had a global book discussion with the author, Stephanie Austin, who published a book called My Will or His Will. And that was a very interesting conversation that we had as well. And this is the speaker who we're still waiting to log on, but nevertheless, John Patrick and I met when he was a part of the Washington Mandela Fellows program. This is a picture of when we hosted the Mandela Fellows at the City Hall in San Antonio to meet the mayor. Then it was Ivy Taylor. That was a phenomenal experience. These were young African business leaders identified that we were able to pour into. And at that time, I was the president of the Alamo City Black Chamber of Commerce. And that was the Express News article citing that young Africans get lessoned in San Antonio. But in fact, we got a lesson in what the African economy, really represented um, to San Antonio, to Texas, and to the United States. And I was pleased to have received a special recognition from the Mandela Fellows when they were here, as we provided hosting of that opportunity. Today, I would like to thank the City of San Antonio. They are Global Chamber presidential sponsors. They have as their international framework Passport San Antonio, and we're looking forward to presenting Passport San Antonio so that we can actually show the international footprint of what San Antonio is doing for the world and with the world. And if you need to see more about Passport San Antonio, I encourage you to go to sanantonio.gov and then look for the Economic Development Department, where Passport San Antonio, the PDFs are there for download. San Antonio has one sister city, and that is with Windhoek, Namibia. As the past president of the Alamo City Black Chamber, we advocated to have our city of San Antonio to have a relationship with Africa, as we did not have any sister city. I was an advocate for that. I'm proud to say that when Mayor Ivy Taylor was our mayor, she signed the agreement with the mayor of Windhoek. And in that picture, you also see our current mayor, Ron Nuremberg, who stood as the liaison between, at that time, Namibia and San Antonio. So today we still have more work to do. Passport San Antonio does recognize Windhoek, Namibia in its strategic plan. And we're also interested in doing more connecting with other cities. Global Chamber San Antonio provides us with that opportunity to be able to make those connections. And I also have a slide Mr. O'Neill is on. We have a special conference next week in which the Texas Association of African American Chambers of Commerce will be having their virtual annual conference. This is the chamber that I was the past chairman for 4 years, and TAC now serves as a collaborating partner with Global Chamber Texas, as we try to increase the support for Black businesses, but also businesses across the state of Texas. And I was invited to present at this virtual annual conference on next week about the new model of global business that we're going to enable the members of TAC to know more about what we do at the Global Chamber. And so I'm looking forward to that opportunity. Mr. O'Neill, would you like to say some words about the conference coming up?
Well, good morning, Christopher and Joel, and those online as well. Clearly, this is a crunch time for us. We're about a week away from hosting our first ever virtual conference, and so it's charting a new territory for us. But we are excited about the program that we have planned for attendees to the conference. Clearly, our attention has been focused, sharply focused by the pandemic that's wreaking havoc on the entire economy. Black businesses suffer disproportionately, I would say, in a negative sense. And so we've spent our time trying to craft a program that charts the best course for Black-owned businesses post-pandemic. And so we want to use this time, and our conference theme, of course, is, as you see, R3, reimagine, reinvest, and recreate. So we believe that the time that we can spend on reimagining what our business enterprises will look like post-pandemic, that is incorporating the lessons that we've learned while we've been sheltering in place, while we've been learning in a Zoom or other kinds of virtual transaction spaces, and then apply those by reinvesting in those newly imagined enterprises, and then come out of it with businesses that are truly competitive in this vastly changed economic environment. And so we really look forward to that. Part of what we do and that we're really excited about is we've got the presidents of 3 of Texas's HBCUs, Houston Tilson, who is headquartered here in Austin. In fact, the oldest institution of higher learning in Austin, predating the University of Texas, Texas Southern University, and Prairie View A&M University. And so those presidents of those organizations, those institutions will be with us for a conversation. Wow, there's a picture of me, Chris. We'll be engaged in a conversation with those education leaders as we, again, walk through what education looks like as we train the next generation of business owners, chamber leaders, et cetera. And so we're really, really excited about that part of the program. Also, on the following day, on Friday, we will talk with the leadership of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus. You may or may not know that a good bit of the work that we do as an organization is interacting with public agencies, in this case, the state of Texas, attempting to change the way the state of Texas affords business opportunities to Black-owned businesses in our state. The Texas Legislative Black Caucus works closely with us to achieve those goals in increased utilization for Black-owned businesses. And so, again, acquainting attendees to the conference with the interaction between politics and economics for the benefit of an improved quality of life for Black Texans is the optimal goal of what we hope to accomplish during the conference. So thanks again, Chris. Chris is doing the conference, a workshop for us on global trade. We're really, really excited about that. This is kind of commercial for that special session of the conference. And so we thank you, Chris, for continuing to support us, even as you've transitioned from being our chamber chair in your new endeavor. You have made sure that we kept the link close, and we appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. And, I know as you've been really the architect of the strategy for Black-owned businesses in the state of Texas, and as the chairman of the USBC, I know that you have a great love and affinity for Africa. And I also wanted to have you in this discussion today because maybe it was 5 years ago, we were able to host at least 50 African young business owners and leaders who we had the chance to shape some of their thoughts about how they would look at the United States and further develop the companies in which they had given birth to that really were more or less in an incubation stage, as I would call it. And so I want to pull you into this discussion, but right now I'm going to introduce Joel Ingelow. Joel has been a young leader who has really hit the ground running in San Antonio. I met him at the University of Texas, San Antonio. He was sitting in a graduate program course that I had the chance to give some of my testimonies to what I was doing as an advocate of business, small business, of Black business. And soon thereafter, Mr. Ingelow had connected back with me and had told me that that we were destined to connect and to work together. I accepted that, and he's been a great mentor to me. In fact, we were able to see Mr. Ingelow speak at the Tobin Performing Arts Center during Dream Week, and he gave his story about how he grew up from the Congo and then came to America. Joel, you're currently enrolled in a business program, is that correct?
Yes, mainly public administration, emphasis in public policy.
So let's talk. What has been your experience here thus far, and then let's talk about where you're from, because it's good to get a young perspective and your perspective. And then Mr. O'Neill, feel free to comment or to ask questions of Joel, or to give your own assessment for, again, I think this will be a nice conversation that we can have, because Africa, in my opinion, is not only the motherland of so many of our natural resources, of religion, of government, but yet it's probably the least understood. And so this is why I feel so passionate about what we're doing today. So Joel, please introduce yourself. Take your story even further.
Oh, thank you so much, Chris, for having me on here. Thank you, Charles, again. Nice to meet you. Thank you for everybody for coming. Like Chris said, my name is Joel Ingaloo. I was born originally in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So if you don't know, Congo is divided into two states, Congo Brazzaville and DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. So that's where I'm from. And Kinshasa is basically the capital. That's where I was basically born and raised. My dad, he was born in the village, so what you see on TV, like the really poor and small house. That's where my dad was really from. That's all he knew growing up. And my mom was on the other side. She was from the city, from a military family. So my mom had a little bit of wealth. So my parents met all through the grace of God, all supernaturally. There are a lot of things really happened before they met between both sides. They weren't supposed to be here alive today, but here they are. And they met. They had my older brother, who was born on Christmas, and they had an older sister, and I'm the middle child. And right when I was born, that's when we decided to move to America. At the time, Congo was going through a bunch of stuff, politically and just with the government. And so my parents wanted a better life for us. So they thought it was going to be through a lottery system, but God had his different way. And so it was really opposite from that. My mom and me came first here in America. My dad stayed behind. And so people thought we were crazy, but that's what the Lord told my parents, and my parents were followed with that. And we moved here. I was with my mom for a little bit. It was really harsh. Was sleeping in airports, cars, just any place we would find. It got to the point where my mom was saying she needs to go back because we're not going to make it here. My dad decided to come. He left my two older siblings when they were young in Africa, about 5 and 3. And so they didn't know what was going on, but so they got left behind with my cousins, aunts, uncles. And over time, so about 2 more years passed, they got to come to America as well. So we all came at different times. And even in America, while we're here, I had a younger sister born here and younger brother that's born here. And so I was the last one born over there. And coming here, growing up here in America, it was just, we experienced so much I'm to be honest, we experienced a lot of racism. We experienced a lot of just people like diminishing us just because my parents didn't know English as much. We knew French, so French was my first language. So we knew French, but we didn't know really English or anything. So people would always degrade my parents. My dad worked pretty much his whole life, warehouse jobs, but he instilled in us school was our ticket out. And you have knowledge is power. So he emphasized school, and he even made a standard for all kids. We all have to go to get our masters. That's minimum in my family. Just because of the credibility, what it can bring what can it bring out from this. So school was really high growing up, and just growing up, I had a passion for politics. I wanted to do politics. I wanted to get into the government just because I love leading. I wanted to see why policies were made a certain way. So that's why I was really intrigued in that. And as I found out growing up, things started changing. I started learning more about Africa, my homeland. I started asking my dad questions, and I started wondering why I'm hearing all these different things about the resources that are in Congo, all these things. Why isn't the country developed and all these things? And I started realizing that it was really just crooked and corrupt. And so lately it's been changing since I got to San Antonio. I just had a passion for international politics, international affairs. And I just been stagnant, just been doing school. I met Chris in my class, and we kind of just broke bread. And he shared with me his story. I shared with him my story. And then he kind of shared with me international global chambers. And I was like, hey, that's really all. I really want to get into that, just because I know the potential of what Africa can bring. And I know I had a couple of meetings a couple of weeks ago, and it was about businesses growing and around the world. And one thing that stuck out to me is they were saying that in the next 10 to 20 years, Africa will be a major spot for businesses, just because the land is there and there's not a lot of infrastructure. So so I learned that. And so that's what it's giving me even more like a zeal, more hunger for Africa and just to help out there. Maybe one day God can lead me to a U.S. embassy, things of that nature. But as right now, I want to grow San Antonio. I want to help San Antonio, the minority businesses. I want to help just connecting international businesses as well, because I'm from there as well. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me in a rundown.
Well, thank you so much. You know, as Joel, you're in your 20s,
Mhm.
and it's so important that we recognize that, because again, one part of our mission set is to make sure that our leaders, our business leaders, have the opportunity to understand what's really important. As I look at the continent of Africa, I'd like for Mr. O'Neill to comment to, you know, what is the real opportunity when we're talking about Africa, that not only Black-owned businesses can learn from, but what do you think is the opportunity for all businesses and our country in particular, as you look at this message of opportunity and expansion of our current business community?
Okay. Am I on mute? Am I good?
You're very good.
Okay. I think it's important, Chris and Joel, that as we expand the conversation about what the potentials are for expanding trade opportunities, business interactions, I think we have to do what we generically call level set. I think we have to really come to grips with what has happened on the continent. Joel referenced corruption as a characteristic of DRC's government. Without buttressing it, or without placing that corruption in the context of colonialism, which was the ultimate corruption of the landscape, and so much of what we have come to accept as normal in governmental structures on the continent are based in these flawed relationships as a result of the partition, 1884, 1885, that again was created, structured expressly to extract exploitatively the resources of the continent. Right now, we know that DRC probably is the richest of African countries, particularly in terms of natural resources. Tremendous bank reserves, despite this quote unquote corruption, but they're locked in these pre-colonial relationships. And so these deposits are held in Zurich, they're held in Frankfurt, they're held in London, they're held in Paris, rather than being unlocked or unleashed so that they could be beneficial to the citizens primarily of DRC, and then by extension, to fuel the kinds of international relationships that would draw Joel back to a relationship with home. And so we've not been honest in our conversations. Right now, we're seeing a second rate of the continent by China. And so we've seen this clear exportation, and Joel's family is emblematic of the devastation caused by brain drain. His mother came from a family that was, again, prominent. His father clearly was very bright because he married his mother, right? and so they've been excised from any real relationship with home. And so they got this brain drain. Joel is here and he's getting schooled in, he's being forced almost to refer to his home country as corrupt. Again, without reconciling it to the fact that it got raped, you know, and we can't continue to have these dispassionate conversations about what the realities are of, or contextual realities of our experience of being cut off from our homes, you know. And so all that to say is I am hopeful, because the skills that he is learning here, the public administration side, I think early stage beneficial interactions on fostering the kinds of relationships will be those skills that public policy development skills, so that I have another friend who is from Nigeria. We traveled to South Africa and Zimbabwe together several years ago with the mayor of Dallas. One of the most heart-wrenching realities is a huge city like Lagos, 6, 7, 8 million people, if not more, without a public wastewater system. And clearly there are Nigerian engineers by the boatload just here in Texas, not understanding where they are across the rest of the world. And we've not been able to transfer this wealth of knowledge gained in public policy development, infrastructure development, into real on the ground benefit for the people who are currently still being exploited. We don't doubt that the same phenomenon are going. Our fraternity, Chris, just announced the instrumental role in creating a borehole. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. It's 2020 and they're highlighting the fact that they're drilling a well rather than creating a water system in 2020. And so, again, until and unless we can figure out a way to sever these caustic relationships that have caused the prolonged and continued devastation on the continent, despite its obvious richness in natural resources. I could go on and on and on, Chris, but I think you get my drift. I think that there's a real opportunity for us to, again, at least change the narrative in how we talk about the relationships between, particularly and selfishly, Black Americans and African natives. That's the real nexus. That's the real relationship that has to be formed, so that as a unified front, we can confront again those interlopers who came in and caused the devastation in the first place.
Well, so after you've heard Mr. O'Neill, again, reflect back to your family and so forth. You can respond.
Yes, no, I agree with Mr. O'Neill. It was pre-colonial. I'll give you an example. For Congo DRC, it was Belgium that came in and kind of extracted all the rubber in the early 1800s, 1900s. And I think, like how you said, it's still those early agreements, early treaties, those connections that still found to this day. That's, for me, it's 2020 that I still can't believe they're still doing that. But I do believe how he said it was, I think it's through exposure. The more people know about it, the more people are aware of what's going on. I believe that's when the change will come. And how we get people to know is by, I guess, growing businesses, connecting these businesses over there, growing, maybe potentially partner with businesses that are already over there. You know, the more connections you have with here, the more people can find out about what's going on, what's really going on. And then I feel like more people get on board to fix the problem. But I do believe it's a little step at a time. And it's gonna be through like businesses, through investors going over there and partnering with those already established businesses there.
And I agree. And I was just, thinking, I showed some pictures earlier of Mr. O'Neill talking to the young leaders who came over that were, I think it was like 25 different cities from Africa, and that I continue to have relationships with. And it was just incredible to me that in the United States effort at that time, it was to forge ahead with developing rich relationships with the citizens of Africa. Mr. O'Neill, in today's climate, what have you seen that has been positive or not that deals with America's progress with forging these relationships, or did we go back? Because again, that Mandela Fellows program was built around this opportunity to create business to business interactions. It was to create relationships that probably did not exist before. It was also to help to influence young African business leaders to be able to see all of America, because they saw various cities across the United States, and then to bring them to the position where they can actually expand their concepts, and then to increase the business opportunities that they had in their own vision.
I guess the most recent positive evidence of at least an increased awareness that was driven by us, that is Black people, was the year of the return from Ghana. Last year, the nation of Ghana granted citizenship to anyone who wanted to, quote unquote, return in celebration of its 50 years of, again, independence. That I think was highly publicized. A number of luminary kind of figures in the U.S. took groups of folk to reclaim their nationhood, their citizenship in Ghana. Clearly, with few exceptions, most of us in the diaspora can trace our roots to some region in Western Africa. We even get cuckoo because we're still referring to them as the names that were given to them by the colonizers, right? So Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, Dahomey, all those names are names that white folk gave to these regions, and so I did the African Ancestry deal. My maternal root is in Cameroon.
Okay.
Clearly tucked up on the western coast of Africa as well. So that was the year of the return was a response from us. The African Growth and Opportunity Act was a federal response. I think it.
Well, can I ask you the question? How do you think the new Pan-Africa Trade Agreement will impact business opportunities?
It's not designed to benefit us. It's a tool that is, again, used in an exploitative fashion. It is designed to create markets on the continent that can be the channels through which European or American interests can extract either labor or money or resources more efficiently, under the guise of being a helping tool. I don't think that it's necessarily bad, but as long as we're aware of what the real genesis of the tool is, then we can do our bit to make it, turn it to our benefit. There's lots, clearly, big interests have been on the continent.
Okay. Joel, with the U.S. elections actually right now in progress, we see early voting taking place all across the United States.
And so that's from Mauritania to South Africa, from the western reaches all the way to Kenya. And so there's no real mystery of what the real foundational reasons for these restructured, renamed kind of transaction vehicles.
Okay.
But 100 years later, we're still entertaining conversations about how we might get them to benefit us. There was no intent for them to benefit us. That's our response.
Yeah, and so I remember when I was in college, I read a book that was written by President Richard Nixon, and in his book, when whenever he talked about Africa, he basically said that it was non-existent to him, or he didn't think that he needed to focus on Africa, and pretty much he was an isolationist when it came to the continent, because he didn't have a value of the people nor the resources. And as we all know, and I say we all know, but everyone doesn't know, that the continent has become more popular because that the resources are there. And of course, anytime you have resources, gold, the diamonds, oil, those are the things in which businesses and governments want to extract for their own profitability. So in light of that comment, and I asked, because you were kind of breaking up on us, Mr. O'Neill, but
Okay.
with the current U.S. elections that we're now participating in, where early voting is being done across the United States, what do we expect? And both of you can answer. Do we expect that with this upcoming U.S. election to change the Africa-U.S. trade dynamics?
I have no expectation that anything changes other than imperceptible shifts in tone or language. The status quo relationships are so valuable that to change them alters the landscape, okay? And it's just, understand, everything's fine with everybody but us. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so while there may be, again, some tonal shifts in the conversation, nobody's talking about moving wholesale the gold and other money deposits from their current locations. See, nobody's talking about going to Zurich and moving all African countries' holdings to a bank in the U.S. or to a bank controlled by Black folk. Gaddafi got killed over that, right? And so the definitive book, in my estimation, on these colonial policies was written by Walter Rodney. You're probably familiar with it. It's called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. If you've not read it, take the book home and study it. A Guyanese brother from the diaspora, of course, who got killed over his insistence on folk reconciling, again, the entire world to this history of exploitation. How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. You get it in your library, digest it, internalize it, and it will open your eyes to, again, this very, very disastrous relationship that we're talking about it casually, and it's a poisonous kind of reality on the ground when you know that brilliant people are living in destitution, not because we want them to, but because the folk who are making their livings off. I'll be finished. 2 examples. He talked about Leopold, and we grew up talking about Belgian chocolate. Mm-hmm. And you can't grow cacao beans in the Netherlands, right? The largest purveyor of coffee in the world in a commercial way is headquartered in Seattle. And you can't grow coffee in Washington State. Nobody's trying to change that relationship. Joe Ngulu should be the owner of whatever in his home. But the largest landholders in Cote d'Ivoire or in Senegal or in DRC aren't Black people. Firestone is the biggest landholder in Liberia. That's crazy.
I see.
So I don't have much expectation that much materially would change until our minds change and our insistence on change becomes made manifest.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't believe, for me, I don't believe nothing will change physically. I think perspectives will change though. Because like beforehand, we didn't have social media, we didn't have, the world was still big. Social media has made the world smaller. You saw how the Black Lives Matter movement was here in the USA, but it was also in Egypt, so Korea, it was all over the world because social media was a big thing now. Now you know about things going on in Nigeria with SARS and all the destruction going on there, but that's through social media. And so I just think that the way we're going is it's just gonna be making more people aware of the situation, so perspectives will change, and it's already happening little by little because I know business owners are already talking about growing business in Africa. So I think it's starting to happen little by little, but I don't believe that this election specifically will have like a dramatic physical change. I think it's more so an exposure of what's been going on, and people's eyes will change. Maybe in the future, hopefully that it'll start making that change with young people going over there. So
So I appreciate both your responses, and we're hopeful, and why I like the global chamber model is the fact that business owners, um, as members, can connect with one another. And I've seen examples of where a business, in one city in one country connects with a business in, say, in the U.S., and they're able to do partnerships and exchanges that work directly towards supporting those businesses. I appreciate seeing entrepreneurs being able to reach out in normal relationship partnerships, not covered under a trade agreement, being able to reach out and to expand their knowledge or the resources or their capabilities. And so that's one of the things I'd like to say. Melissa Sanderson had a question earlier, and I don't know if the panel members have this, but we certainly can direct this question back to the city of San Antonio in terms of how they look at this issue, since her question is, do you happen to have information in Namibia's economic development priorities, especially as regards rare earths and also development? And so I will say that I have had a chance to meet one of the ambassadors of Namibia who had a successful visit with some of the areas in San Antonio. In particular, I didn't know and was exposed to the fact that hunting is a very big market that Texans enjoy. And so Windhoek, Namibia has some great hunting opportunities. In fact, that the associations were trying to work out some agreements in terms of what that would look like. And so I will take your question back to the city of San Antonio and ask them that question. So I appreciate that, Melissa.
Chris, if you don't, let me jump in right there, Chris. Just excuse me. Think about, again, context. White folks are interested in going kill animals in Namibia. That's crazy. But the question was about IT and other tech related stuff. But who is talking about building a road from Windhoek to Zaire, right? Who's talking about building a highway from Windhoek to Harare? That requires the kind of, that's why I believe, again, public, that professional services will be the entry point by which Black talent can go home and begin changing the corruption, if you will, of government to begin delivering services to the constituents, the citizens, right? Transportation is key. Infrastructure links like wireless now towers, satellite links, those are critical infrastructure components that right now are the exclusive domain of folk who have no real interest in the people, but in their pocketbooks. And so that's the thing. Excuse me for interrupting, but I just thought about, again, if the city of San Antonio is thinking about, wow, man, we can get guys over there to kill some water buffaloes. you know. Well, that's not important to the people who live there, because it locks them into either being a hunting guide or the guy who fixes tires on Land Cruisers, right?
Yes.
There's much, much more to developing an economy than, by extension, and I really will be finished.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And so we oftentimes will talk about Africa from the standpoint of the U.S. and how the U.S. sees Africa, but are there other countries that understand Africa and are better positioned for growth with Africa? Like, what about China? I mean, we've said the word China, but what about China?
China's following the playbook. They're saying, "Let me get in, man. Everybody else is getting some, let me get in." And so they certainly don't get a pass. Of course, they have the benefit of these, again, toxic historical relationships. So they've come in with a different kind of silver platter. They're saying, "Well, I'll build you a hydroelectric dam. In exchange, I need to have your GDP for the next 40 years." It's essentially the same model, but I will say we become more adept at the kinds of trades that we make as governments, no less corrupt, right? You're still going to be siphoning off resources that could be used for the benefit of populations, but China is doing just what Belgium did, just what Germany did, just what France did. They're just doing it in a new wrapper,
I see. Joel?
Going off of that, I'll say, yeah, he's right, because China is basically kind of like shifting the model. Instead of taking resources and coming back to our country and manufacturing here, they're saying we're gonna kind of like twist it and say, hey, we're gonna build your infrastructure there, but our people are gonna come work it. So you have something like that happening over time. Now you have all the infrastructure, the head leaders, all China. And so what happens after that? You have businesses create economy, businesses help the cities grow. So who's going to be in power now? And over time, you have the Chinese are in power over a country in Africa. So you kind of see it's kind of the same thing what's been happening, but now it's like a twist to it, saying we're going to build infrastructure there in exchange for how you say GDP or exchange for some type of natural resource. So I do agree with what he's saying.
Okay, thank you. I mean, again, I look at China from the standpoint that they ran into the opportunity because America determined and decided that in essence Africa was not important. And so when you have years of neglect or no relationship, then other world powers fill the void, and they will naturally go toward things in which are of interest to them. And even with the lower interest rates on money and the lending process has been more favorable for China, as I saw in Senegalese, that they were talking about how that was more beneficial. I think that there's a lot of work still that U.S. Has to do with relationships with Africa, of course. And Mr. O'Neill, to your point, I believe too that Black-owned businesses, not only in Texas but across the United States, have to figure out what professional services, as you gave as a great roadmap ahead, have to provide these African markets so that there can be a natural relationship. Sometimes we just do not see the true relationships exchange when government to government interact, because and as I've seen, Black-owned businesses are not bought into these trade or into these relationships. And so we see the talent from the U.S. that never gets to go into Africa in any of these cities. And we oftentimes will show Africa how well we do in the public services such as water or energy and highways, but we never actually connect the small business to the small businesses of those regions that would probably have a better relationship working one-on-one, as opposed to the bigger trade agreements and pacts that have been made in those areas. That's just my thought on that. Speaking from the Texas, we have a few more minutes. What are some of the top business opportunities for Texas companies, for instance, in the DRC and in other countries if they were given the roadmap to success? Mr. O'Neill?
I think the short term, and here again it's contextual. Again, it's scale. You know, what are we prepared to do right now are not the big things like I think make the most sense, which are the exploitation of intellectual property, intellectual power, the skills transfer that will allow for changes on the ground. And so we're trading expertise for results on the ground. I think the short term are Joel, Chris, and Charles decided that we wanted to be in the coffee business or African attire or African artifacts. And that's something that we could do in scale. Manufactured goods. There may be some canned goods, something non-perishable that we could, develop a market for on this end and begin some exchange. But I think that's the short term, again, very Smith, tangible, achievable at this point. Those other kinds of, if they were talking about extractive industries, mining or fossil fuels or those kinds of things, just require so much capital and so much red tape that they're a little more distant and a little bit less short-term achievable. Again, the kinds of, if we were to talk about developing a metropolitan transit authority in Windhoek or in Kinshasa, a system of traffic signals in a city that's already teeming with population, where you have to go in and dig, electrical conduits and sewer conduits and those kind of things. That takes a different kind of capital than we currently have available, and a different kind of red tape cutting than we have in the short term. And so those are the kinds of long-term, we wish they were longer, and we work to shorten the real window of opportunity, but we've got to begin those kinds of conversations. I think the short term is still base level retailing, exchange of goods and services, but the goal is to this other almost intergovernmental kinds of, that is B2G, business to government kind of contracting.
Okay, thank you. Joel.
No, I second what he said. I do believe right now, I think it's for getting people to understand what's going on. And I think establishing these relationships with individuals over there. So I think, let's say, Black individuals who want to, how you said, artifacts, or wants to make a coffee company or something. I think it's important that they establish a connection with someone who, either if it's in America, establish a connection with the African community here and establish a connection with the African community over there. I think when you have the relationship first, that builds a platform for you to have the business, because you're not going to just invest in a company that's overseas, because it doesn't make sense. You don't know who that person is. You don't know nothing about it, and you can lose your money that way. So I think when you partner up with organizations that are here, that are African organizations, if you want to go to Africa, support those organizations, get connections, and also connecting with individuals over there. I think that will bring opportunity for that business growth. But I do believe the short term is just resource and trying to build those relationships for the short term. The long term will be how he said, to make highways. And if you heard the saying, you can feed a family, you can feed a man a fish and he'll be happy. But you teach him how to fish, he can feed his whole family. So instead of just building infrastructure, kind of have those relationships and teaching those individuals to learn how to do it themselves. And I think those connections will keep going, And if one business works, it's domino effect. More businesses will come, So I do believe in the long term, it's how he said, build roads and highways and things. But it starts with the businesses here.
Well, look, gentlemen, I appreciate both of you so much. Mr. O'Neill, you can see why Joel is my deputy director of
That's
the
right.
Global Chamber of San Antonio. Truly, I see a comment from Stephanie Austin, who we did an interview. She wrote the book, My Will or His Will, and you can find her book at mywillorhiswill.org. And she's a member of our Global Chamber San Antonio. And she says, Joel, your father is a very smart man in obtaining your education. She's very impressed with you as a Black man who inspires to make an impact to the world. And then also, she says, you're a great leader emerging in you, and she prays that God continue to order your footsteps. And then there was a gentleman, Dwight Winkler, who introduced himself. He's an international trade finance specialist. He lived and worked in Lagos, Nigeria for 7 years and conducted business in several other African markets. And he left his connection in the chat area. And he says, my African business experiences were great and memorable. And that's what this is all about. This is the first of many series, as I want to make sure that the Global Chamber really explores what the African continent represents. Maybe some of the comments today don't necessarily reflect what you believe, but I am very happy to know that we have the ability to have subject matter experts and leaders who can provide a perspective to the world. One of our board members, Lily Gundy, just arrived back from Egypt, and which is a part of Africa. Most people, the census doesn't say that, but Egypt is a part of Africa, and we're going to have her on one of our conversation series. I'm looking forward to that. And then lastly, I just would like to again share with you that I'm super happy that we have the support of the City of San Antonio as the Global Chamber presidential sponsor. And what does that mean? That means whenever we do events in the San Antonio metropolitan market, they will show up as an event sponsor. And so if you want to be a presidential sponsor and you like our content, please go to globalchamber.org and you'll see the link for sponsorship. Additionally, I want to make sure that I thank Joel for his comments today. And again, I'll be participating in the TAC conference, the virtual conference that Mr. O'Neill has told us about earlier at tac.org, TAACC.org. And I look forward to being able to talk more about how businesses can take their businesses global through a new business model that Global Chamber presents. I look forward to being able to talk more about that. And then we also have a Globinar that will be conducted by one of our board members, Jane Gonzalez, who's the president and CEO of MedWheels. MedWheels focused on medical defibrillators, but now they're in the PPE world, of course, with COVID-19. And Jane is going to talk about how do we scale second stage companies, typically companies with $1 million of revenues, 10 or more employees, into growing more. So she says that second stage companies are the true backbone to the US business economy, and yet don't receive as many of the benefits of grants and support. And she wants to talk about a neglected stage of companies in which she believes can do more if truly supported more. So we look forward to hearing her conversation on that. Jane Gonzalez is also a partner of Global Chamber with PPE. And so if you'd like to order PPE from the Global Chamber, you can go to globalchamber.org, do a search on that, and MedWheels and the Global Chamber will show up. And so that concludes our event for today. I want to thank you again for attending. We have 1 minute to go, but I think that we've accomplished our first goal to talk about Africa. Thank you again, Joel. And we'll be able to circle back with our invited guests He had a business meeting that he could not break, unfortunately. But I'm so happy that we had the president and CEO of the Texas Association for African American Chambers, Mr. Charles O'Neill, who also serves as the chairman for the U.S. Black Chambers Incorporated in Washington, D.C. So thank you again, Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Ingaloo.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll do it again. Y'all have a great day.
Thanks, Chris. All right. Nice meeting you, Joel.
Nice meeting you, Mr. O'Neill.
My pleasure, man. We'll talk soon.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
All right. All right.